Parenting is at the core of everything. And that relationship then informs the relationship that we have with everyone and everything else on the planet. Parenting is an inside out job, right? It starts inward and then it goes out. It's not an outside in job. The change that I stand for is transforming the way that we parent our children and starting with the way that we parent our inner children, right? That then transforms the relationship that we have with everything else. Like when I became a parent, everything that I thought wouldn't happen happened. And everything that I didn't sign up for happened, and I wanted to know why. One of the most powerful messages that I definitely bring is
Jacqlin, welcome to the Resilient Entrepreneurs podcast for women founders who are done with being humble and ready to be heard. Let's have that juicy conversation today. Thank you for joining us.
It is a pleasure to be here, and I'm just delighting in how aligned I'm feeling with your message and who you are and how you show up. So let's do it.
I'm so excited. It's going to be a great one. And we're going to start off with a nice big juicy question. If I were to hand you a magic wand today, what change would you make in the world?
Oh, what a great juicy question. So if I had a magic wand, I would love for people to understand that parenting is at the core of everything, right? The way that we were parented creates the relationship that we have with ourselves. And that relationship then informs the relationship that we have with everyone and everything else on the planet, right? Our partners, our kids, our work, our body image, our health, our sense of worth, everything. And people laugh when I say that parenting is everything, but it really is an absolute truth. And parenting is an inside out job, right? It starts inward and then it goes out. It's not an outside in job. And I thought it was an outside in job for a long time. Someone just fixed my kids, right? It was that kind of thing. And it all starts with the way that we were parented. And one of the biggest things that's landed for me is if there's anything that we're not happy in any aspect of our lives, that's where we have to look. So the change that I stand for is transforming the way that we parent our children and starting with the way that we parent our inner children, right? Our inner child, which is the relationship that we have with ourselves. And that then transforms the relationship that we have with everything else. So that would be what I would use my magic wand for.
Oh my God, I love it so much as a parent of teenagers. Absolutely. I think this is so on the forefront of my mind all the time, how I'm parenting them, what kind of humans they're growing into. We're past the stage of the diapers and the feeding and the bathing. Now it's all the mental and emotional and social skills. And it definitely is interesting to think about hearing my mother's voice sometimes coming through, or hearing my grandmother even, it comes through. And I do think we are a generation ready to break some of the generational things that have been handed down and really make difference, which I think partially is to do with we're in a social media, we're in a more informational, like we're more social, we're more connected, we talk more about topics like this. For instance, on a podcast, our parents didn't have these things to learn from. They only knew what they knew from what they were socialized in. So we're in a totally different time now. So it's great time to be having this conversation and fascinating to talk about. I love to get into like the psychology and the sociology of how we are, who we are, and what got us here. And what are we going to do to get us there, where we want to actually go and how we want to show up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't think about the relationships beyond my own self as a parent, but also my relationship with friends and, romantic relationships. I guess it really is all relationships that show up. Tell us more about your work and what you know.
Oh gosh. So as before we jumped on the podcast and hit record, right, we were talking about exactly this. And it's when I first got passionate about relationships, it wasn't because I had perfect ones. It was because I had really challenged ones, and I felt so disconnected from everyone. And I wanted to know why. Like when I became a parent, everything that I thought wouldn't happen happened. And everything that I didn't sign up for happened, and I wanted to know why. So I went on a big journey and started asking a lot of questions around why what happened, and why the rose tinted glasses fell off, and why I wasn't having the level of connection and the depth of connection that I really wanted in my relationships. And it my journey was from essentially blaming everybody out there for what was going on to turning all of the, pointing fingers inwards and taking responsibility there. And when I did that, everything shifted, because all of those relationships, and I know that I named it, as everything, our relationship with everything that's outside of ourselves is a reflection of the one that we have within. And I know that I didn't want to look in. That was the no-go zone, right? It was like, because then it was too painful. It was too scary. I didn't like what I saw. I didn't want to dig any deeper. And when I had the courage to do that and to start asking those questions and to know myself better, that's when everything shifted. So the journey that I've been on over the last 18 years since I became a parent, because that's when it all kicked off. I'm not going to lie. It was like, it just exploded my life in a way that wasn't pretty. Like, it really wasn't pretty. I ended up in an institution with severe postnatal depression. I had anxiety for the first time in my life. And I didn't know why that happened. And now I completely understand it, because everything that I was feeling as I was growing up, from childhood to teenager to young adult into adulthood and then into parenthood, I'd spent so many years pushing everything down and not feeling anything. Yeah. And when I chose to become a mum, everything that I'd been pushing down came up, because I didn't have any of the old coping mechanisms of having a few drinks and everything else that I was doing as a young adult to soften the edges and to numb out everything that I didn't want to feel. So it all came up, and I had to deal with it along with a newborn baby. And there was so much there that I just had no idea about in terms of what actually happens when you become a parent, and the emotional side of it and the mental side of it, not just the physical side of it, not just the fact that we've got a new being to look after. It was like my pre-parent and post-parent self was like a completely different person. And I didn't know why. And I wanted to know why. So I went on this big journey of understanding why we think and feel and behave the way we do, how we're conditioned into human beings, because we don't come out of the womb and then stand up and go, right, where's lunch? We're like animals so often do. A baby deer will be born and it's on its feet, and it's got to do that, because otherwise it's not going to survive. And for us, there's just a handful of things that we know how to do. We know how to poo, we know how to pee, we know how to breathe, we know how to suck, we know how to cry, right? We all know that one. But everything else is learned behavior. And I'm really thankful for that, because it would really suck having to get out of bed every morning and learn how to walk again, right? But a lot of the other things are learned behaviors, belief systems that are programmed into us from our parents. And they were doing the best they could with the information they had, and that was something else we touched on before we hit record. But understanding how that programming and how the way that we are impacted as children, because there's no perfect parenting, and how we drag all of that through into our lives as adults and just continue to repeat it and continue to react to it. So my work is about all of that, and being able to understand and know ourselves better, which for me has helped me understand and know other people better. It's helped me see other people and have a lot more compassion for other people. Oh my God, it's helped me lift the resentment towards my own parents, right? Which is why I put on the tagline of my book, it's the truth about parenting. It's also the truth about being parented. So it helps us understand that our parents had a lot less knowledge than we have access to. I mean, we're sitting here on a podcast, right, talking about parenting and talking about all of this beautiful stuff that brings us into the adults that who we are, and how we lead and how we love and how we go into business and how we entrepreneur, everything, right? So yeah, there's a lot there in terms of how I came to do what I do. But one of the most powerful messages that I definitely bring is not needing to get it right and not needing to be perfect, and bringing the vulnerability and bringing the authenticity and being real and being raw. And I have a very real and raw title of my book, which my mother is horrified about. And I said to her that the world is ready for this now, right? The world wants to hear this now. We don't want these polished performances anymore where we're under so much pressure to succeed and to never get it wrong and never, screw it up and never make mistakes. Because how else do we learn?
Go on, share the title of the book.
So the title of the book, and there's a beautiful story around this. The title of the book is Fuck Up Your Kids with Grace and Humour, The Truth About Parenting and Being Parented. So what I love about that is that it really grabs it, right? It's like the truth about parenting is that we are going to fuck up our kids. We're going to pass on a whole lot of our stuff about the way we see and do things and the way that we behave. And if we're aware of that, we can help them filter out what's ours and what they can give back to us as their parents and what is actually true for them. And that's huge.
Yeah.
I'd love to even challenge this a little bit, because as much as we say we are fucking up our kids, that kind of takes away the responsibility from them. So at once they're adults, is it not also their role to say, I took that on, it wasn't intended that way, I interpreted it that way, I was protecting myself that way, and I feel like you've messed up my life.
Absolutely 100%. I mean, when I said to you both that I'm so happy that I've been able to, through the work that I do, lift the resentment that I had towards my own mother. And it was doing exactly what you've just said. It was like, it's my responsibility what I do from here.
I have this beautiful example of something from years ago when I had such a resentment for my mother having me on a pedestal. Can you imagine? Like, people who don't have a lot of attention from their parents might think that would be the fantastic position to be in, but I resented so much that she had me on this pedestal. And then in a session, coaching, therapy, whatever it was, I was quickly brought down to the truth, which was, who's still on the pedestal? Step down. If you really don't want to be on the pedestal, just step off it.
Beautiful.
Right? And it's we attach ourselves to our view of the world. And it is the way, it is the only way, and we are right and everyone else is wrong, because that's our protection mechanism, yeah? We have to help ourselves feel safe in the world. And yet, when we can expand our awareness around what we're actually doing to create the scenario, that's when things shift. And I love this conversation because, yes, it's about parenting. And what if it was also about parenting your business? Because we like to say that being in business for yourself is the greatest personal development journey you can ever be on. You're saying being a parent is the greatest personal development journey you can be on. And both are true.
Absolutely. And I mean, the way that we parent ourselves is the way that we parent our business. Right? It's like all the threads are there, and yeah, it's such an incredible understanding, which you were speaking to, Vicky, so beautifully, around that it all comes back to our own personal responsibility, right? It's like, what are we bringing? What's the energy that we're bringing into our business, into our parenting? Where is the reference point around blame or responsibility or any of those pieces? If it's out here, then nothing's going to change, right? And actually understanding this part was so transformational for me, because having the finger pointing outward with whatever it is the most disempowering place you can be in, because you need everything out there to change so that you can be okay, right? I need my mother to change her behavior and start loving me in the way that I want to be loved, right? And I need my, my business partner to do the same, essentially, right? And it's like, well, I'm the common denominator in all of these stories, so changing here is going to change everything out there. And this self relationship and the inside out job, that if I work in here, it's like the shortcut, right? It's like the shortcut route, because I'm trying to sort my relationship with my kids, and I'm trying to sort my business relationships, and I'm trying to sort all of this out here, and I just do it here, and everything out there changes just naturally. And
It
when that
does.
landed, it was like, oh my God, I just found the shortcut to life, right? And it was like, quick, I've got to tell everybody about it.
I
And
love that so much.
yeah.
And I can't help but think that that shortcut has some brambles in it. You get scratched up along the way,
Oh my
don't you?
God, does it what?
Cutting
Yeah.
through. Because as you said, you don't want to, there's this kind of shame, and there's a lot of heavy emotions, thick emotions that we feel when we face our own truth, because it means that we have to see ourselves differently. And it means we have to see that maybe we were wrong about something, which feels terrifying because we're raised to be perfect. So if we're wrong, what does that actually mean about us? Perfection is a killer.
that's the thing. And I mean, one of I use premises in the work that I do, and it just gives you something to grab onto, like like the very logical, rational part of my brain. I used to practice architecture, so I am very much in that, and I've had to let a lot of that go, which is exactly what you're talking about. Oh, what if I'm not right? What if there is a different way here? And my thoughts and feelings aren't facts is a huge premise that I use, that we're so taught to believe everything we think and so taught to trust our feelings. And our feelings are connected to the past. They're not connected to the present, which is, what we're talking about when I mentioned what my tattoo means to me. It's like when I'm in the present and I'm in this place of needing to be perfect or needing to get it right, and then I just let all of that go, because what does that mean about me was something you said, Vicky. What if I get it wrong? If I muck this up, it doesn't mean anything unless you make it mean something, right? And I've been teaching this, obviously, because I'm raising two boys, and now my boys will actually use that line back at me, right? They'll be, well, it only means something, Mum, if you make it mean something. And I'm like, oh. So this is the problem with the delightful problem of consciousness, where your kids are just getting so aware that they're actually spouting your stuff back at you. And it's beautiful, right? I mean, because it's so true. It's like, it doesn't mean anything if you muck it up, if you get it wrong. It actually means the opposite, that you're getting further ahead, that you're pushing through these comfort zones. And yeah.
Taking risks, trying. I mean, these are the things that make people successful, but it's often the thing that we try to protect our children from. I think we protect our children from risk taking because we know what the extreme possibilities are versus the reality, which most people take risks and they're absolutely fine. Maybe they stumble and maybe they figure it out. But yeah, it's parenting is incredibly eye-opening to ourselves. I find this exact same thing. And the gift of giving your children that awareness of self is huge, because exactly like you said earlier about like presenting this polished, perfect persona to the world is not what anybody wants. That it feels inauthentic, and in this AI driven world now, everybody is just going to dismiss it as AI and scroll past it, ignore it, throw it away, versus being fallible, making those mistakes, sharing the realities, the natural, the all of that is really, I think, what people want more and more of. But it's getting over that fear of perfectionism, that we can't show that side of ourselves because that feels really scary to show.
So risky, right? And so scary. And And look, I've had a huge journey, obviously, because it's the theme of my book. You know, I used to get up, and this is a hilarious thing to admit, and I do it because it illustrates this point so beautifully. I used to get up and I used to blow dry my hair, straighten my hair, put a full face of makeup on to go for a run.
Wow.
To go for a run. And that's the level of mask, right? And protection of image that I had to have. And I have so much learning around what that does for us and what that limits us from, because all we want is to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, right? That's all we want in our lives. And when we're putting out this polished image, we're not seen, we're not heard, we're not understood, we're not loved for the truth of who we are. And we wonder why it doesn't land. And for me to understand that and to stop protecting, right, and stop enabling and stop rescuing my kids from the realities of life, which Laura, you brought up so beautifully, because oh my God, it's such a thing for us parents to want to protect our kids and to want to, keep them safe. And if we are not going into that with awareness, we're actually instilling fear in them, right? We're coming from fear and teaching them to be scared of the world and fearful of everything in it. And I've got a whole chapter on this in the book, because it's been such a huge piece around, we have to let our kids fail and we have to let them be out in the world. And our job is to sort of parent from the back, right? And allow them the space to be out in the world, and to create a space, to create an environment where they can come back and talk to us about anything and
Yes.
everything. And this is one of the biggest things in my book, because in the world today, with the internet and everything that's changed, because let's face it, it's not like it was when we were kids, right? It's really, really different. And if we don't create that safe space where our children can come and talk to us about anything and everything, and which means we have to stop controlling, we have to stop wrapping cotton wool, we have to stop, rescuing and enabling and protecting our children to the point of instilling fear in them, because we want them to be safe. Of course we do. We need them to be able to talk to us. And if we're not authentic, if we're still wearing this mask, if we're doing the, do as I say, not do as I do thing, if we're doing all of these old ways of parenting, where most of our parents weren't honest and truthful and authentic about what happened to them as kids and what they went through. And sometimes it's like, they press the delete button on all the stupid stuff that they, that they did as kids, or that we did as kids. Oh no, because we just don't want you to drink alcohol, but I'm not going to tell you about all my experiences with alcohol, or whatever it is. And that's what our kids need to hear. And I know that when I started sharing, age appropriately, of course, when I started sharing the truth about my own experiences as a kid and as a young person, my kids' ears just went boing, right? They're like, oh my God, they're not telling me off. I'm not being lectured here. It's about mum. It's not about me. But the story, right, that I'm sharing illustrates the point. It's a teaching moment, right? And it's done through authenticity. It's done through deep vulnerability. And that's what creates the connection. And that's why now, if my boys have any kind of problem going on, it's on the table, right? And we're talking about all of it. And it just makes me so incredibly happy in terms of that we've created that relationship that I wasn't able to have with my mum growing up, but that we do have now, which is really, really beautiful. Yeah. So now that the resentment towards my own mum has lifted, because I took responsibility, as you said, Vicki, understanding that she did the very best that she could with the tools that she had, living in survival, right? Born in the war, while the war was going on. And now she provided a foundation for me to be able to do the work that I'm doing now, right? To be able to start to get myself out of survival mentality and survival, moving from survival and to be able to open up a completely different space for my own children to grow up in. Yeah.
It's important to understand that history too, to understand why, the reasons why our parents parented us the way they did.
Mm.
Because like you mentioned, the war, that mentality would be so different than our mentality so many years on as parents. But also that, they wanted to keep us safe. They wanted to protect us and they wanted to encourage us. And this, I'm going to relate this to the business and entrepreneurship thing here, because they guided us to safe jobs. And many of us and many of my, contemporaries went into corporate jobs, follow the money, find where the safe things were. And no one took the risk. And very, very few ever went into entrepreneurship. That was like unheard of, unless you had like a family business that you kind of inherited and you went that way. But very few people went out on that limb to take those big risks. Whereas I think, and it's going to be so important for the next generation coming up, the teenagers of today, to take those risks and go into owning businesses, because AI is cutting those corporate quote unquote safe jobs. They're going to have to look for something different, and they're going to have to build a different world. And many of them will have to partner and work together and build something new, create things that we don't even know what they are yet. But by the time these teenagers are out of university, the world's going to look completely different. When they're in their mid 20s and 30s, what we can't even envision now what that is going to be like. But they need the skills now to be able to take those risks and to have a safe place to land when they need some advice. And I feel like what you're saying is there's a switch from being a parent. And I kind of think was saying this earlier too, like when they're little, you're looking after all the basic needs, the food, shelter, safety, that stuff for them. And as they get older, they need more psychological help, more emotional support, more social, like how do I, act in a social group, and these things. You switch into like a coach mode, right? You go from being, and I think that's really cool. And when we think of it that way, parenting doesn't feel so overwhelming anymore. How can we coach our kids better? How can we be that safe place for them to come, like you said, put it all on the table, whatever they're dealing with? I have this saying, I say it all the time, that strict parents lead to sneaky kids. So yeah, I've seen that so often with parents that, just blanket, get rid of social media. There's no access to phones. And I can tell you their kids have Snapchat on their iPads or their laptops. They find a way, right? These kids are smart. They're wicked smart. They will figure out a way. So parenting has to be more thoughtful, and we have to help them get prepared for the world that's coming, because it's going to be unlike anything we even can envision.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so much that you said just there. But I think the piece that really struck out for me, and it really lends itself to the entrepreneurship and the business side of things, and how fast the world is changing. And I think one of the biggest things, one of the most powerful things for me is coaching my children, right? It is getting off the drama triangle, right? The drama triangle of the rescuer and the perpetrator and the victim. And when you're off the drama triangle, the rescuer becomes the coach, right? So I was the biggest rescuer there was, right? That was my operatus. I can't even remember how you say that. Yeah, that. It was that. That was me. It was my default. And moving from the perpetrator to the challenger, and moving from the victim to the creator. It's like, we need creators in the world. And that's what I hear you getting to, Laura, is like, we don't know what's coming. And if we think we know, then we're actually limiting ourselves, and we're completely sort of roadblocking ourselves into the old. It's like we're just picking up what's happened before and trying to put it down in front of us as the path forward. And yeah, I know people like Elon Musk. He tells his people that come into the room, right, you leave everything you think you know at the door, and then you come in. And that's scary, because we like to know, we like to have certainty, right? And especially with parenting, one of the first things that I said to my boys in relation to seeing the threads of the work that I now do was, I said to them, I've never been a parent before, and you've never been kids, you've never been sons, and I've never been a parent. How about we just work this thing out together? And they were like, oh, and I was like, oh, right. It brought so much relief, because a lot of the time I'll be like, I don't know what to do in this moment. Like, I don't know. I can say that I think I know, and I can try and be right, and but I know what's best, and I'm the parent. But when I say I don't know, it opens everything up for the new intuition and everything to just drop in, right? And then I'm like, oh my God, there it is, right? And usually it's the complete opposite of what I think I should have been doing. And for me, helping parents and helping people, because I work with people, not just parents, because we're all parented, right? Helping them let go of what they think they know, which includes needing to be right, and actually connecting them with their intuition, right? Their creativity. And being able to parent from that place is completely different. So I don't do scripts. I don't do tips and tricks and, here's what you do at 5 years old and here's what you do at 12. And I don't do that. And it's like being able to connect a parent or a person to their intuition. They're going to get what is needed in that moment when they're open. And I remember, I'll give you one little story, and it's so powerful. I remember my boys were just sort of picking at each other. You know how they do, and I was just like, it would really trigger me. Like I'd get really, and this is my own discomfort, and I'd often intervene, and that was the way that I used to deal with it, right? Just, right, how do I shut this down as quickly as possible? I intervene, and I jump in because I think I know what's happening here. Right, my older boy is the bully and my younger boy is the victim, and so I need to split it up. And I'm like, and I used to stand back, and this is such a great tool. I used to actually physically do it because I had to. And I'm like, what's actually going on here? What is going on here? Because I think I know, and I know that what I think I know isn't actually what's happening here. And when I step back and I go, I don't know what's going on here, and then something drops in. And what dropped in was, I'm like, when you guys do this, you like sparring, like, like boxing. And they're like, yeah, Mum, that's what we're doing. And I'm like, oh, okay, as you were, I'm stepping out. And I stopped intervening because what I was actually doing was getting in the way of their brotherhood, right? I was getting in the way of them working it out, them figuring out how do we relate to each other here. And I was blocking that because I thought I knew what was going on. Right? And I was wrong. So intuition is the way forward. And that has to come from exactly what you said, Laura. It's like, we don't know what's going to come next. We have no idea, right? Our kids are going to be going into jobs that haven't even been invented yet. So what does that look like, right? In terms of our kids' journey. But in terms of our parent journey, we've got to let go of everything we thought we know. And that's kind of scary. And it's the most life-changing thing you can ever do because it brings you into the present moment where you actually receive what's needed that's relevant to the present moment and not from the past. Because that story that I shared with you about my son being the bully, my younger boy being the victim, I was the victim, right? Of course. So I'm putting myself in, projecting myself onto them. That's what's happening. It wasn't what's happening at all.
Yeah, you're trying to shut down your own trigger of how you felt in that situation when you were being teased and you don't want this anymore. Yeah, this is so good. This whole conversation, if I was to put it into 2 words, is we're learning to embrace uncertainty. And the more we can strengthen our relationship with uncertainty, the more freedom we have.
100%. And the other thing is embracing uncertainty means that we have to embrace our humanness. Right? We have to allow ourselves to be human. We have to allow ourselves to be fallible and imperfect and vulnerable and messy, right? And really messy. And I think once I learned that, and because I've got it in the title, I can't get it wrong. Right. I call my book "Fuck Up Your Kids with Grace and Humour," but you can't actually fuck this up. And why can't you? Because you can always come back. You know what? I've really got that wrong, guys. I really like, whoa. That was grandma's words coming out, right? What, did you feel her? She was here, right? And nothing against my mum, but we will often say that because I hear her words coming out of my mouth, and I'm like, oh God, that's not what I wanted to bring here. And I apologize and I own it. And, the rewind tool is just so perfect. So can we just rewind that? Do we take it all back and we just start again, And so the messiness of being human has actually helped me to not have to have the certainty that I used to need to feel safe, because now I can be in that sort of empty void of like, I don't know what's going on here, and then receive, right?
Yeah.
Receive the genius, and that's the creativity, that's the intuition, and to be able to connect parents and people with their intuition, that is the gift that we need moving forward.
And nothing could be truer in business as well, because when we can allow ourselves to be messy and to know that what if there was no right and wrong? What if? What becomes available to us if we just let go of this right and wrong concept? Because it's just our way. There's no the way, it's our way. And however we show up in the world creates a journey for those around us. And so in a parenting environment, if you fuck up your kids, well, guess what? The perfect parent fucks up their kids, because that's the journey of childhood, is learning our own path as a child, learning our own identity as we become young adults. And the only way we're learning is through our own interpretation of our own truth. So it actually doesn't matter what the parent does. The child is going to have their own experience of whatever happens. And I love what you're bringing, because it opens that conversation at such a young age where a child can interact with this learning process and this growing process and their shaping of their own identity in a really healthy, wholesome way.
It's beautiful. And it leads to the gold, right? It leads to the gold. It's like when I sit in those uncomfortable conversations, and it's sticky and it's messy and and every part of me just wants to run away or shut it down or make it stop, and we sit there and we sit and we hang in the tension is the way that I frame it. And the gold comes. Yeah, the gold comes, and you got to go through. It's like you don't make gold out of gold. You make it out of lead, right? You make it out of the raw material. And we're so scared of the raw material that we never get to the gold. And we rob ourselves and we rob our children. And there's so much there around what we're focused on. Like we're so focused on having these beautiful parenting journeys or these beautiful entrepreneurial journeys, and
Perfect.
Yeah, but we're focused on the shitty bits, right? And if we're focused there, but we can't hang out with it and then shift our focus, because we always get to the gold. And that's the beautiful thing around being able to be okay in the uncomfortable, be okay in the uncertainty, be okay in the tension. And there's one thing that I really wanted to speak to, because you were talking about right and wrong, and I'd love to offer another frame here, because this was one of the most mind-blowing things that I'd ever learned in terms of good and bad, which I was in that right or wrong frame. It's like, oh no, but it's not, it's wrong for me to actually just express myself fully and just, be the truth of who I am and, call my book, have the F-bomb in my book. That's wrong. And it's like, it's actually the right wrong doesn't actually bring it back to childhood. What brings it back to childhood is the good and bad. And this just astounded me. It's like whatever was made good and whatever was made bad when you were a kid. And we drag that through into our lives as adults. And if swearing was bad, yeah, because swearing was bad when I was a kid. We weren't even allowed to say bum. Like that was a swear word, right? And now the fact that I've got the F-bomb on the cover of my book, my mother, how am I going to tell the ladies at the village? You know what? And I just said, just tell them that it's called The Truth About Parenting. It'll be okay, right? And then they'll get a hell of a shock when they're going to love it, right? I know they're going to love it. But if it was made bad, and here's the thing that I had no idea about it, whatever was made bad when we were kids, there's no way we're going to go there because it's linked to our survival. Right? When we were kids, we had to be good to get love. We had to be good to get acknowledgement. We had to be good to get validation. And if we were bad, those things were withdrawn. And that was the fear. So and I have a chapter in this book, and it's called Why We Need to Stop Making Screens and Everything Else Bad. And in terms of, and I was the sugar Nazi. I was I used to make everything bad and everything wrong and everything, and to be able to understand and lift off the bad label and also lift off the good label, right? Because that doesn't help a lot of the time either, because no, this is good and this is how you have to be and this is the perfect image, and right? And it's bad to be that, to go to the other side, because it's actually linked to our survival. And at a core primal level, we're not going to do things that we think are bad. We're going to be drawn to what's good, even if it's dysfunctional, right? If being seen and not heard was good when you were a kid, then you're going to do that in your business, right? You're going to do that in your parenting. You're going to squash your truth. You're not going to speak. You're not going to express yourself fully. And it's a really, really deep understanding that has completely changed the way that I parent, because now I can have these conversations about everything with my kids. Right? We talk about sex, we talk about sexuality, we talk about porn, we talk about drugs, we talk about alcohol, we talk about all of it. And my kids are very aware in all of those areas because I don't make those conversations bad. Right? And just being able to take the label off. I mean, imagine being able to take the label off ice cream, right? And just have an ice cream because it's an ice cream. And start to ask different questions like, okay, well, is it healthy to eat 16 ice creams a day? Maybe not, but it's not bad, right? Because I know that for me, bad it's a judgment, right? And I know that when I used to, this is a great example. When I used to judge ice cream just because it's here, I brought it into the space, and I'd be eating the ice cream. And we actually did a workshop on this where I had two co-facilitators. We were doing a workshop that was about the shades of gray, right? Bad on one side, good on the other, and all these shades of gray in the middle. And one of our facilitators, we were eating the ice cream, said, "Oh, this is so good. Oh my God, this is the best ice cream I've ever had." The other one was going, "This is so bad. It's going to be on my hips tomorrow." Right. The other one was, "It's just a fucking ice cream." Right. And it's like, it's just an ice cream. We can ask different questions around and taking the judgment off, because the judgment is linked to our survival. If you go back to a very core, very primal part of ourselves, which is still doing things to be good, even though I'm 50 years old and still, avoiding doing what's bad because of that link. So it's huge. And I'm really excited to get that piece out there, because I know that a lot of parents, a lot of people still making a lot of things good, a lot of things bad, and screens is just such a great example. And Laura, you said, look, if we ban Snapchat, if we ban whatever, the kids are going to find a way. They're going to do it. Right? If we say don't drink alcohol, they're going to do what I did and was sneaking out at 15 drinking alcohol, right? They're going to go and do these things. And if we make them bad because they were bad when we were children, and we just carry that conditioning on, then we're actually going to make our kids define themselves as bad for wanting to do those things, right? And I know a lot of people that grew up believing that they were bad, right? Like inherently bad. And that's where the shame comes from, right? So we have conversations around screens where I say things like, oh, dude, I went to go and, put my alarm on last night, and then half an hour later I was still on TikTok. And my 13-year-old goes, oh, Mom, I did the same, and these are the conversations that we're having, which cannot come from screens are bad. You're not allowed to use them, right? Or flipping the other way, and just use use them however much you want. It's like, it starts to ask different questions about whether it's useful. Is it empowering to stay up half an hour later on TikTok? No, because now I'm tired for my podcast interview or whatever it is, right? It wasn't me last night, by the way, but it did happen. It does happen because I'm human, right? I'm human, and I'm able to have these conversations with my kids without the judgment on there, so that we can be neutral about these things and start to understand the impacts, the great things about screens and devices, and the not so great things, right? Because Google Maps are saving marriages all over the world, as far as I'm concerned, right? So things like that. So it's a
It gives us
huge
more
frame.
choices. It gives us a freedom to choose, a freedom to have critical thinking, a freedom to
Yes.
self-inquire. And the freedom comes from what you've said early on, which is to be, I guess, to have the courage to look within and to not be afraid of what we're going to see. And I'm mindful that we're like, this is a conversation that I feel like it could go for days, but we're just around at that time where we're going to wrap it up. So I'd love for one of you to summarize, what do you know, in a couple of words, what's the essence of your message, Jacqlin, to really leave with our audience? Let's just rock their worlds a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the essence is that we don't need to be perfect. Right? We're here having a human journey. We're here to be human and to allow ourselves to have that experience. And that when we do, that leads us to the gold. Right? It's like the messiest, most, unpretty part of my life has led me to where I am now. It's led me to the book that I've written. It's led me to the work that I do. It's led me to being able to see people transform the way that they live, the way that they love, the way they relate, the way that they parent, and the way that they create. So allowing yourself to be a human being, right? Not just a human doing, as we may have heard before. And that brings us into the real, raw, authentic, vulnerable humanness, human part of ourselves, which actually makes us feel far more connected to one another, because we're connected to that part in ourselves, and far more connected to the human race, each other, and the planet. So it's, for me, it's that shortcut into the deeper connection that all of us are looking for.
Perfectly said. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. And connection is something that we all strive and want more of, and I want more of for all of our community. So thank you so much for joining us today. What a great conversation.
It was an absolute pleasure. And yes, we could go on for days.